eat and have a nice family meal inside. So let's make a start. I think I'm going to share my screen straight away, Matteo. If that's okay.
Yeah, done.
Okay. Let's share this one now. It's the same slide. That's great. Can you see that, Matteo?
Yes.
Great, fantastic. So welcome everyone to this part of the webinar. I'm Alan Rogers. I'm the University Collaborations Manager for the European Cultural Academy, or ECA for short. ECA also runs teacher training courses and courses in contemporary art, but I'm here to tell you about our summer courses in architecture and design. And when we say summer, we usually run the courses all the way through the period of the Biennale. So the summer actually is from April to November. It's quite a long season. We're joined today by Dr. Matthew Hardy from the Princess Foundation and Dr. François Penz from the University of Cambridge, whom I will introduce properly as we go along. And we also have 3 students from 2022 joining us: Annalisa Slater, Akansha Gupta and Noor Adjel, who will all give opinions as to what it was like working with us in 2022. So I want to start, if I may, just by introducing the courses, and I want to start here with Venice itself, Venice and its lagoon, and what an amazing place it is. In 2022, we started to run in-person courses after a period of COVID and online work and all the rest of it. We actually ran some small courses in 2022 in person, and we saw what a difference it actually meant for the students who came to Venice and studied in this amazing architectural environment, and in person and with their peers, with their contemporaries. That was quite a different experience from any kind of online course. Venice, for the people who don't know Venice, many do, but it's an amazing architectural entity. The island itself is made up of 118 small islands, each with a church, a public square, access to water, and it has 400 bridges connecting all these very small islands into one entity. The transport system is amazing. It's either foot, you go on foot, or you go by boat. So it's no small wonder that it's become a model of sustainability, and people are starting to look at the island in a new way, as in a sustainable way, because there are no cars and there's only one rail link. So it's no surprise that the city is a candidate for the sustainability capital of the world. Within the city, ECA, the European Cultural Academy, operates in several places throughout the city, mainly in these amazing patrician palaces, which were palaces for noble families: Palazzo Michele, Palazzo Mora, Palazzo Bembo, Palazzo delle Zattere, and Castello 6668, which is our new offices and teaching spaces. It doesn't have a fancy name yet, so we're hoping to find one at some point. And we also have access to an outside space, Giardini della Marinaressa, for outdoor projects. We work very closely with the European Cultural Centre, and the European Cultural Centre is the second largest cultural institution in Venice after the Biennale, and it hosts major international exhibitions in art and in architecture in Palazzo Mora, principally, which is on the top right-hand section of your screen. For those of you who are joining us who've never seen inside one of these patrician palaces, this is the inside of Palazzo Michele, which has been our main teaching space for most of 2022. This is the interior of the larger room. We have lots of different kinds of models for architecture and design courses. There is a dedicated model, which is that we work principally with a university. The university bring their students to us, and the course is exclusively made for those students. Now, I'm only mentioning that today because I know that we've got other professors who are joining us and we have maybe courses in development with them as well. So it's one way that we work, and it's one way that we can work in the future. But the model I want to concentrate on today is model 2, which is an open model, whereby a potential student, a participant in the course, can go to our website, find the course information, and apply directly through our website to join the course. When you do that, when you go to the website, you come to the architectural pages, and immediately you see the courses that say apply VENICINEMA, apply branding in architecture, apply sustainable cities. This means that the course is open for your application. If you click in that course, you'll see a variety of information, some course content, the kind of things that you might be looking for, and the things that you might get out of working with us. You'll also see a list of contributors to the course. This is 2022 contributors, but if you click on those contributors, as you see in the top left-hand corner, each one of them has a brief biography and a link to further information about them. So you can begin to get a picture of the kind of experts, the guides, the professors, the visiting professors that kind of build up the course content with us. This person is going to be very influential in 2023. This is Leslie Loco. She's the curator of the Venice Biennale of Architecture next year. And her curated show is called The Laboratory of the Future. This is going to concentrate on Africa and the African diaspora. It's going to concentrate on land and language, global and local, decolonization, decarbonization, and this lovely, lovely phrase in the middle of it, the architecture's ability to negotiate between and across boundaries. I like that very much. That's if architecture can't do that, then it's involved in putting up those boundaries. So she's going to be very influential, I think, in terms of planning the courses. Most of the courses, almost all of the courses that we run have a visit to the Biennale, both the Giardini and the Arsenali sites. Some courses have a very strong association with the ideas of the Biennale, others less so, a little bit more indirect. Yet again, some other courses actually take their inspiration from other things that are in Venice. Venice is so rich in terms of cultural and historical references, and most things are actually here, physically here. So if there is a course, for instance, which regards glass, the Murano glass factories going from 12th, 13th century, cristallo, filigrana, chandeliers, murine, and the great makers, Toso, Venini, Seguso, Di Santillana, they're actually all here. You can see all these objects here. Painting goes from Veneziano, the altarpiece, through Bellini, Tiziano, Tiepolo, Calenletto. All these are present within, usually within the churches that they were commissioned for. And of course, the architecture goes from vernacular, fishing industry kind of huts made from wood, through Byzantine, Gothic, Baroque, Palladio, Art Deco, etc. A new addition is Anish Kapoor. Anish Kapoor opened his foundation this year in 2022. So, what's the experience like for a student working with us? Well, we kind of believe that it's really key to a participant's progress. It's somewhere between personal growth and an inspiring environment. And we try and get both of those right. It's important to create a safe space, a space where students can feel that they can share information. And in fact, we do promote peer-to-peer learning, student presentations, portfolio critiques, and generally space within the course in order to make an individual project for a student. It's very easy to cram a course, but actually you need some space within it. And although we have many visiting lecturers and experts, we also believe in social learning and leaving space for that to happen. So this slide, this is the final slide. It sort of summarizes what we've said. If you are applying through the website to one of our courses, the fees are 1,650 per student. But at the moment, we've got an early bird discount, which we're running until December the 31st. So if after this webinar, you're inspired and you want to join a course, if you apply for that course before December the 31st, you will automatically receive a 20% discount on course fees, which is worth 330 euros. Even if you haven't been accepted yet, or you're still in the pipeline, if you make the application before the 31st, that discount applies to you. And 330 euros is the price of a flight, food for a week, etc. It's not a small amount. For your investment, there's a list there underneath. What do I get for my investment? Tuition, course leaders, visiting lecturers, visiting professors, site visits, all the tickets for museums, all the tickets for travel are all included within the price. And of course, an amazing space to work in. Not included in the price are flights, accommodation, and your food whilst you're in Venice with us. So thank you. That was a very brief overview of what we do. Thank you. Join us in Venice next year if you can. Explore your creative path. And please get in touch with questions if you need to. You'll find my email on the website. We'll try and answer questions as well in this webinar today. So without further ado, I would like to hand over, if possible, to Dr. Matthew Hardy, Senior Lecturer in Architecture and Urbanism at the Prince's Foundation in London, responsible for the joint Oxford MA and MSc Urban Development, and our
urban development.
Sustainable Urban Development, indeed, and our joint course leader for Sustainable Healthy Cities, Building for the Future, this year in June 2022.
Great. Thank you, Alan, and welcome to everyone. I just wanted to, if I may, show a few slides, which I shall just get up now. Right. Where are we? Going full screen. Right. Is that full screen? Alan, can you hear me?
Yeah, it is.
Brilliant.
It is
Okay, you can see
yes.
that. I just want to give a very brief teaser about why are we going to Venice to talk about healthy cities for the future. And I think Venice is a really intriguing example of that can teach us so many things. It's a place where, in terms of health, quarantine was invented, and last year we went to see one of the original places where quarantine was practiced, and how successful that was in keeping disease out of the city. It's a city which is built in a swamp, as you can see. That's one of the swamps in the lagoon that we will see as part of the summer school. It's a city that has learnt to live with water in a way that most cities in the world are barely starting to grapple with, in the way that we know that with a warming world, we will face heavier rainfall, sea level rise everywhere. Venice has been coping with the sea and with water for 1,000 years. So we can learn so much from the way that the water is managed in Venice. And in terms of sea level rise too, I think perhaps Venice is struggling with these issues, as many other cities will come to struggle with them. And so, I think no better place to go and see the effects of sea level rise. We know there's been already, several, a number of centimeters of sea level rise, probably 20, I think, in the last century. I think we heard they're expecting more, and historically probably more than that too. How is Venice coping with sea level rise? And we'll be able to see examples of that both from the past and from the new system that's been installed. Venice also has some other very characteristic problems that the world faces. It's a shrinking city. Its population declines. In one of the pharmacies, there's a counter which sort of claims to show the population in sort of steady daily decline. And yet it's a place that's full of life. So how does it square that kind of conundrum of shrinking and growing at the same time? I mean, on the terra firma, on the mainland, Venice continues to grow while the historic city, the historic center, continues to shrink, a problem that many cities around the world face. It's perhaps the #1 example of over-tourism, if you like, and of the problem of a society in which there's abundance of leisure. What do we do when we don't have to work all the time because machines are doing it for us? And then there are some classic lessons that Venice can teach all of us, I think. It's one of the world's, as Alan has said, truly walkable cities. You simply cannot, it's illegal to cycle in Venice, I'm told. You have to walk. That, of course, poses issues of accessibility for people who can't walk, but then it has a completely separate motor transport system, admired as long ago as by Le Corbusier as the only possible city of the future, with a complete separation of modes between walking and powered transport. It has a really incredible food system, which we'll learn more about, including a whole lot of work that's been done in recent years to bring food production right back into the lagoon, producing a lot of things. One of the things that struck me going back to Venice last year after 16 years away was how much the food had improved, and the accessibility of it too. Not an expensive place to eat if you buy fresh food and cook it for yourself, or just eat it fresh, surprisingly. And finally, I think there are some real lessons for a world which is warming, and that is housing for a hot climate. And I will show just a few slides to talk and give you a teaser, a taster of how the traditional Venetian buildings addressed climate. And lastly, I think, and perhaps more subtly, Venice is a city which was founded as the head of an empire that spread across a vast area of the Middle East and the Mediterranean at its peak. And so we have an architecture which is an architecture already of a polyglot world, if you like, of a multicultural world, an architecture which was built and contained a whole range of influences from the Christian world and the Islamic world, which covered the Near East and the Mediterranean, and which accommodated people as a great trading nation, people from around the world, and where people moved and traded and did business. So a really, really interesting place to visit and to spend 12 days. Venice, as I said, built in a swamp, associated with disease historically, and frequently racked by a plague, but from 1468 founded a lazaretto to quarantine with and really they had amazing success with the quarantine. But the prevalence of disease had affected the way they responded to climate. In those days, warm, moist air was thought to bring disease. So they built an architecture with these amazing interior shaded spaces, which were thought to allow cool air to flow through the building and allow it to breathe in a very real sense. And you see this all over Venice, these amazing deep spaces. And you'll see inside buildings which are closed to tourism. And for me, that is one of the real opportunities of this course, is getting to go inside buildings that you normally only see the outside of. And these echoes of the Venetian palazzo with its central sala all across there, and reflected in the modern architecture of Venice too, as in these buildings from the 19th century, these from possibly the early 20th century, and so on, right into the 20th century and beyond. You see these echoes and reflections of an architecture of health that is very unique and very much anchored in its place rather than in its time, I would argue. And so, you know, wherever you go in Venice, you encounter these surprising insertions from the 20th century, and we'll be able to see some of these, you know, some better known than others, some almost indistinguishable buildings which were built in the 1960s, which, you know, at a second glance, you wouldn't notice. So there's this incredible opportunity to study an architecture which is very much, as I said, of its place, and which has gone on trying to express what it means to be Venice. And I hope that all of us will eventually come to think about what Venice is now, because we'll set in this summer school a problem, and that is the problem of Tronchetto, the square island that was built in the 1960s for car parking. How do we transform Tronchetto, which is very much the working heart of Venice? It's the Venice that the tourists don't normally see. It's full of very large buildings, quite imposing, you know, a number of them already fallen out of use, and served by some innovative public transport, again, not normally seen by the tourists to Venice. So we'll be looking at that and thinking about how we make Tronchetto for the future. Thank you very much. And I think over to Akansha, is that right, Alan?
That's right. So let's introduce Akansha Gupta from New Delhi.
Hello.
Hello, Akansha.
Hi, Alan. Hi, Matthew. So good to see you guys
Yeah,
again.
good to see you too. What time is it in Delhi at the moment?
Oh, it's midnight.
It's midnight. So you win the gold star for being with us tonight. Really, you do. Akansha was with us for Matthew's course, Sustainable Cities, and I just asked if she would share with the webinar some of the experiences that she'd had with us. Over to you, Akansha.
All right. I'll just share my screen.
Okay. I think.
Yeah.
Now, can you share your screen? Let me just see.
Yep, I can.
Yep. There you go.
Can you guys see it? Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to thank ECA for this truly immersive experience that I had at Venice. It was quite amazing, and of course all the professors who helped us through. So talking about Venice, it almost seems like everybody has a kind of idea what to expect from there. And it's kind of, bit of it is everything that you think, and bit of it is a lot more than you'd imagine. So the first three images that I have on are what I think that most of us think what Venice looks like. But the following 6 images I have on will be things that you will get to see, which you could have never imagined, or maybe have imagined in a space like Venice, but could have never gone into the depth of as a solo tourist, or just as a person, or even as a student of architecture or design visiting on your own. I think ECA really helped, and the course, in fact, really helped feel layers of a city, which is just so nuanced. Venice is not just it's not a new city. It's a city full of historical context. It's a city full of different economic issues, different kind of morphologies, aesthetics, influences from religion, but also in terms of today, in terms of what we think in the future, it faces some of the most pressing issues, things like food, transit, identity, and of course climate change, and all of them kind of interlink to kind of create a culture. And I'll be honest, it might think that you're doing this just for Venice, but I would, as an architect myself, I would say that it's truly a skill that you're learning, which could be probably transposed into many other cities, contexts, sites, and just like a new way of thinking that you could go on to. talking about the course, it was a good mix of lectures, studio time, and on-site visits, and which I think is something very characteristic of design school, and I kind of really appreciated. And my personal highlight of my entire 2 weeks there was so forgive me, I didn't introduce myself. I'm a healthcare architect. I work in the space of healthcare interiors, so designing hospitals and allied spaces. And we visited San Lazaretto, if I'm correct, which is probably the birthplace of the quarantine. And just standing in the spot where so many of medical, current medical practices, good practices in design were born was absolutely surreal. We were asked to design from just like the next course which is happening, we were also asked to look at Troncheto as a site. And I had only one idea, or I had only one vision for it, which I would wish for anybody and everybody who does end up joining the course, is to not look at Venice superficially, to actually sit and stay and stare and just see it for a lot more of what it is. And I think that is pretty much what I would want to say.
Thank you, Akansha.
Great. Thank you, Akansha. That's very, very, very sweet. And wow, that's quite an insight you gave. I think that's a little bit of a moment when you stood there in that quarantine.
It was.
On Lazaretto. Yeah.
And especially in the context of COVID pandemic, it was just.
Yeah. Okay, let's just move on quickly. I'm aware of time, and I want to bring in, if I can, our second guest speaker, Francois Penz, who's a professor of architecture and the moving image at Cambridge University and former head of the Department of Architecture, emeritus fellow of Darwin College, and who was course leader for us in a unique and innovative course called VENICINEMA, or VENICINEMA in Italian. Francois, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen? Or?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what I've done here. Hang on. Let's see.
Yeah, we have a partial screen, I think.
Really?
I think so.
Slide. Oh, yeah. No, you're
right.
You see a whole screen, or no? Hang on.
We see a whole screen, but I think it's partially a partial image.
Okay, so hang on. I'll try again. Share. I'll share the sound as well because I have some sound. Go to basics. Oh, this one. This one. Can you see your whole screen now? Hello?
Yes, we can, Francois.
You see the whole screen. Okay, that's great. Okay, well, welcome to this presentation of VENICINEMA, which is a workshop which took place in September, for 2 weeks in September. And I will basically explain a little bit about the course and then be happy to take some of the questions. So essentially, there's two basic concepts of the course, which is over 2 weeks. The first concept is about trying to understand how Venice has been characterized in the movies, and of course, Venice being the second most filmed city in Italy after Rome. There's an extraordinary wealth of material from which we can learn how filmmakers have expressed, characterized Venice. And I think that that formed a very important part of the basis of the workshop. So I will give you a very brief overview of how Venice may have been represented in the movie. And of course, one would have to start with this view, this panorama of the Grand Canal by Alexandra Promio. So it's the very first panorama or traveling shot ever in cinema in 1896. So I think you see that Venice has a very, very long association with cinema. It's part, in a way, of the DNA of cinema. And then if we look at the general characteristic of the films of Venice is filmmakers have real difficulty avoiding the picture postcard prettiness of Venice and take full advantage of it. Like here, Katharine Hepburn being in awe of finally arriving from the US and discovering Venice. So this really the city participating is sort of an emotional state of the characters. Similar here in Eva by Joseph Losey, we see the character of played by Jeanne Moreau, who is leaving Venice, and she's in the city here. Expresses, I mean, very effectively, the lonely Piazza San Marco, very seldomly seen like that, expresses the loneliness of the character and also her selfishness in that film, if you've seen it. But perhaps one of the best known film for Venice is Don't Look Now. I think quite an extraordinary film, which is, there's a lot of shots at night, but I would very much recommend it. And it sort of shows a little bit the dark side of Venice. I mean, there's no picture postcard prettiness in this case, and I'll talk a little bit more about this film later. A lot of foreign filmmakers are trying to benefit from or trying to take advantage of the sort of a glitzy Venice, but very often failed. And in my view, here we can see sort of Bruce Willis and Michelle Pfeiffer being in a way dwarfed by Venice, which is it's very difficult to use it simply as background, because it sort of always tend to want to move forward. But I think perhaps what was more interesting for our course was to look at what I call a longer term, or what I call longitudinal study of the films of Venice. For example, in the case of Anonymous Venice, which is like a derive in the Bordian sense of this couple, there's hardly any tourists. While on the other hand, that's 1970, and in Pane Tulipani, Bread and Tulips of 2000, just only 30 years later, then we have a situation where the main protagonist, when she arrives in Venice, she has difficulty finding a room. But of course, this is 8 years before Airbnb arrives. And if we move forward to a film like Welcome Venice, by a wonderful film by Andrea Segre, we see that Venice now is sort of completely overwhelmed with Airbnb, which is one of the key issue, and that's expressed in dramatic terms, in fictionalized terms by Andrea Segre, which is a fight between two brothers trying to decide what to do with the family house, either to keep it for the fisherman, the man on the right, or to turn it into an Airbnb. So it's a very interesting sort of topical issue, and something which was very much at the heart, particularly in the second week, of thinking of what might be the Venice, the future of Venice. the second concept is, apart from learning from the existing material, which was there, was for the participants to be able to make short films in a very modest way. And the first concept was to try to do observational films, because I think that, as Paul Éluard, French poet, says, voir c'est comprendre, to see is to understand, and often we fail to see the world around us. And as said by stated by the Chicago School of Sociology, in order to transform the city, we must indeed first observe it. I think that I'm a great admirer of the French novelist Georges Perec, and who makes the point that observe the street, apply yourself as a sort of a way to for people to observe the street. Nothing strikes you, well, you don't know how to see. And I think this is often what is happening, especially when we're in an overwhelming situation. And this is one of the our contributor, Alan Marcus, was making this this film about the Molo around the Piazza San Marco, and we can see quite clearly that, and I think it was quite a wonderful example, because you can see that although he has his camera there, poised to film those nuns, none of them pay much attention, all those people with those luxury luggage. What a contrast between the two. And that's simply because in a real life situation, we are often overwhelmed, and particularly with noise, that we are incapable of concentrating on, in fact, what is perhaps of interest and right in front of us. So the framing itself allows us to be able to understand this, what I call a form of spatial ethnography. And this is one of the short piece by one of our participants, Annelise, will be shortly talking as well. So it's just choosing a part of, in fact, a very different part of Venice. I mean, this is obviously the opposite side of the island. This is on Santa Elena, where we can see the kids, in a way, starting to be observing their elders playing, and it's a sort of a double type of observations. The kids observing their brothers, I mean, whether they are related or not, I'm not sure. And I think this sort of playing with the edge of the frame. It's a very sort of simple observation. One of the very first exercise, putting the camera on a tripod for 2 minutes and then discussing what has been observed. The next level in the first week is to try to sort of taking the benefit of editing, to try to put together a series of those images, so that each of those sort of stills can remain and have their own sort of integrity. But and in this case, for example, this is Danielle Charles, who was very interested in and observing how people were with those amazing cable crossing the Calais to dry their clothes in very different ways. It's a very simple sort of observation of, in a way, everyday life, and everyday life was an important ordinary life, just trying to understand very simple things around us. This was really one of the key aspects of the first part of the week. Creative geography is also very important. It's surprising in most films, which just take different elements of the geography of a film. And here we were asking the participant to be able to sort of recreate the part of the part of Venice that they had worked with. And this is very much like in the spirit of Guy Debord, the famous map, psychogeography map of Paris, 1957, or Catherine was working with the idea of palimpsest, sort of quite innovatively, reimagining what through her filming in different parts of Venice, what sort of new map she had created. So thinking of the relationship between filming in the street, but also sort of looking at the geography and the topography is a very important part. Just showing the wonderful crew we had assembled. Marco, colleague in Liverpool, is an architect specialist of photography. Alan Marcus, I've mentioned him, is a filmmaker, has made 2 films of Venice observational film. Carlo Montanaro is a great historian of the films of Venice and sort of welcomed us in his house, which he's turned into a cinema museum. Francesco Muso, part of the University of Venice, in the second week was very influential in helping us to create individual projects thinking of urban futures. Joe was a music composer, music and is an important part, and sound is an important part of making movies. And we were very finally, Andrea Segre, I mentioned, he's done this wonderful film about the Venice and Airbnb, a struggle between the 2 brothers. He was a very wonderful presence also to help us to formulate the project of the second week. The projects were very different. In fact, they reflected very much the different inspiration and background of the different participants, which brings me to say something about who it is for. Well, it is for whoever is interested in making short films in Venice. But in this case, we had many participants who actually were postgraduate students in architecture. They were PhD students or master students, and they were in the second week. They were essentially taking further some of the ideas they may want to carry on developing when they are back home, because one of the key aspect also of the project, the Venice Cinema, is to bring the student to a certain level. It's not a film school really, but to have those transferable type of skills that they can apply to other cities in the future. Just simply mentioning that there are in September, there are lots of wonderful film-related events that we participated in, for example, the Mostra in the Lido, the Cinema Galleggiante, wonderful sort of film festival of the coast of Giudecca, very surrealist, to be watching surrealist movies in that evening. And I had mentioned a film, Don't Look Now, and then we were able to actually reenact and project the film at the place where it was in fact shot, which was, I think, a real treat for all of us. So I think that I probably have spoken for too long already. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francois. That's really, really excellent. I'd like to bring in straight away, a little bit conscious of time, Annalise, who was a student on this course. And there you are. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Annalise. Do you need to have share a screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think Matteo can make you a co-host.
I think I am already.
You okay?
Try.
Great.
Okay. Can
Yep,
you see
got
my
it.
screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'll try very quickly to share my experience of the Venice Cinema Summer course. I think there will be some overlap with what Professor Penz just taught. And next to that, also my experience of living 2 weeks in Venice. I'll try to do that using this map of Venice, where I pinned some points that were important during these 2 weeks. First of all, this was my daily walk from the place called the Airbnb I rented, Ramo del Mossi, to the Palazzo Michel. I was lucky to cross the Rialto Bridge every day before or after the tourists were there. It was also often the meeting point with the other participants of the course, because it was like central to the place we stayed. This were us. We were 6 participants on the site, and as Professor Penz also already mentioned, we were very diverse. Some master students, also diverse of nationalities, master students, somebody with a background in film history, others in architecture, some PhD students, some master students. Myself, I am an architect. I also have a master in human settlements. And for the moment, I worked also a couple of years as an architect, and for the moment I'm doing a PhD in urbanism and spatial planning. I'm doing a PhD on the image of the Flemish urbanized landscape in film, in which I try to discover through films another or the experience of the everyday, and not using the maps and the statistics that spatial experts tend to use. So to try to discover a more nuanced image and other qualities that are often overlooked by spatial professionals. And I think it's obvious that this relates very much to the theory and the courses we had from Professor Penz in this Palazzo Michel. There were also, like it was already mentioned, a lot of interesting other lectures. And next to that, you cannot do a summer school on films without seeing a lot of movies. So we saw 2 movies of Alan Marcus. We saw Homo Urbanus Venetianus, Welcome Venice. We also had the opportunity to talk with 2 of these directors. We also had a very nice guided tour in the ghetto where one of these movies was shot. And we had this very nice projection of Don't Look Now. Next to this theory and these films, we had, like was said, 3 short movies we had to make, 3 exercises. For the first movie, I went looking for the place of the teenagers in Venice, which took me all the way down on the edge of the island. There's a park with a basketball field where they gather. The second movie I made, I walked from the station. I crossed all Venice all the way up back to the park. So it was much about the contrast also between all these narrow alleys that are very much crowded and filled up, and then the open space of the park. And then the third exercise, we were working and talking already a whole week about the limits of Venice, and I tried to visualize. So you have the visualize that. You have the physical limits of Venice, but also the limit of tourism, the lower limit of the amount of inhabitants. Then you still have a city. So that was the topic of the third exercise. And next to all that, we also had some very nice excursions, like to the Lido. We could attend a press conference at the film festival. Of course, being at the Lido meant we also had to go and see the hotel where that in Venice was filmed. We had a very unique experience of the floating cinema. And then during the weekend, we could visit the Biennale, the Giardini and the Arsenale. And then next to all that, or on top of all that, there was some time also to do some other visits of museums and expositions, to do touristic visits, touristic things, still filming, and then of course enjoying the good company, the good food, the good weather, the nice environment of Venice.
Great. Thank you, Annelies. That's really excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I want to bring in one more student who was on the design for architectural brand course, Noor Adjel, who I can see is with us. Hi, Noor.
Hi.
Hi. And Noor had a very interesting time in Venice, along with some other students from the United Arab Emirates. So, Noor, if you want to share with us a little bit about your time in Venice, that would be great.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Of course, by now you know my name is Noor Adjel. I'm a student studying at the United Arab Emirates University in UAE. I'm currently an undergraduate second-year student majoring in urban planning and minoring in fine arts. Okay, so let's talk a bit about my experience in Venice as a city. I would have to say that no matter how many videos and vlogs I watched about Venice, experiencing it firsthand is definitely totally different. I mean, from the moment we reached the airport and we took a water taxi, I felt like my journey had already begun. And once we reached there, we quickly realized that there wasn't any other means of transportation, like cars or taking bikes, except for boats, and relying on the willpower of your own two legs to take you from place to place. I noticed that it was a lifestyle that focused on being very reliant and dependent on oneself. Also, one of my favorite things I loved about Venice is their narrow alleyways. I felt like they provided this continuing dynamic interaction between the built environment and also the natural areas and natural elements. And lastly, the food. We can all agree that we all love Italian food, and I know that me and my colleagues really looked forward to visiting restaurants to eat at every day. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the course, and the course is called Designing for an Architectural Brand. But what is the meaning of branding in architecture? Okay, so when we think of branding in architecture, we think of two things. We think of function, so what is the building used for, and its association with the user. And the second thing is the brand itself. And brand refers to the different architectural styles. And while we were in Venice, we observed these different styles. I can name a few right now: the Romantic, Gothic, Palladio, and Moorish architectural styles. We also noticed that these styles heavily were influenced by the time period in which they were built, and also by external factors like Western and Eastern cultures. Yeah, and each architectural style has its own identity, and it shows and expresses that through its distinctive architectural elements. Within the course, we also worked on a psychological method to test how people perceive buildings and their elements based on comparing one building to another. We also took the time to understand architectural photography. We learned about storytelling within photography and how to create dynamic and depth within a photograph. And in fact, we had this photography learning experience where we were asked to go out in the streets of Venice and take photographs of architectural elements to somehow create a storytelling behind them, in a sense. We also did architectural sketches of buildings by following techniques of an architect. And honestly, one of the most exciting things about what we learn in the studio is that we make sense of what we learn by visiting places and experiencing it in real life. Yeah, I also wanted to mention that within the course, I remember in my admissions letter, I wrote that I wanted to find the linking point between urban planning, architecture, and art. And I'm glad to say that I've found some connections. I won't say them right now because that will take too long. But I also want to say that lastly, I wanted to say my university opened up a new arts degree. And because I enjoyed learning at the European Culture Academy so much, I spoke with the arts coordinator, and she is willing to make connections with the academy, which is great. So you might be seeing me again sooner than you thought. And that's all.
No, we would love to have you back again. Really, we would. Your contribution was fantastic this year.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm aware that we've kind of packed the hour for architecture, and so there's very little time for live questions. I'm thinking that a solution to that may be that if you have a question, please type it now in the chat, and I promise that on Monday I will get back to you with answers to your questions, because I think we need to move on to the next webinar session on contemporary art. So if you do have questions about architecture and design courses, please put them in the chat. We'll save the chat, and we'll get back to you very shortly next week. Fantastic. Matteo, shall we close the session there?
Yeah, just want to thank you, thank all your guests and all the participants.
Yeah.
And of course, we are always here to answer any question, although we don't have the time now. But anytime it's good to get in touch with us for further info.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank our two guest speakers, Matthew and Francois, and also our three participants as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hope to meet
Bye-bye.
everyone in the summer.
Yeah, me too.
Bye.
Bye.